Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thanks very much for joining today's WEConnect International webinar. My name is Maggie Berry, and I'm the Executive Director for WEConnect International here in Europe. I'm delighted that you've joined us for today's webinar, which is the power of storytelling for business. Our presenter today is Salma Shah. She is the founder of the Salma Shah Personal Branding Consultancy and Director of Soft Skills for Tech. And she blends business psychology, mentoring and coaching, and her clients include both the David and Goliaths of the corporate world, like Oracle, O2 and Reuters, as well as small businesses, coaches and consultants who are seeking to develop their clarity, confidence and effectiveness. Today, Salma is going to be talking to us about how sharing stories can help your audience to connect with you. A good story helps listeners to identify with your business and with your personal brand, but storytelling in business needs planning and an understanding of the potential outcomes before you start, and we're going to give you an insight. Salma's going to give us an insight into that today. To keep background noise to minimum, I'm just asking all participants to keep themselves on mute, and please do use the chat functionality if you have any questions. There will be time at the end for Q&A, Salma's probably going to talk for about 40 to 45 minutes, and the session is being recorded, so you will be able to listen back to it afterwards. So Salma, thank you so much for presenting for us today. I am going to pass the presenter rights over to you, and the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, Maggie, thank you very much. Everyone, hello and welcome to my webinar on the power of storytelling for business. Maggie's given me a wonderful introduction, so I won't tell you anymore. So effectively, from my perspective, storytelling is both a combination of an art and a science. And Maggie, can I get the screen to the next page here? Oops, hold on.
You should be able to move the slides yourself now, the number above the top.
Okay. Right. Okay. So, yeah. So, the power of storytelling for business. So, storytelling for business, from my perspective, is both an art and a science. And what we'll do today is look at, you know, I want to go through some concepts such as the hero's journey, how to tap into emotional drivers, introducing tension and conflict, and adding emotional texture and sticky metaphors and how we do it. So, storytelling. Okay, so I guess one of the most important things to recognize is that it's the fact that people can't concentrate for more than 18 minutes. So I've got my fingers crossed today because I'll be talking for more than 18 minutes. But the reality is that according to research in neuroscience, we can't stay focused for more than 18 minutes. So, you know, to keep your clients and customers interested in what you do, you need to come up with ways of telling stories and engaging them in a very, you know, in a way that makes sense to them. And in my experience, I work with both individuals and with organizations. And quite a lot of organizations I work with, they are selling technical software, which, you know, at the best of times isn't the most exciting thing. And I'll give an example. One of the clients I work with, they sell healthcare software. And when I first started working with them, the conversations were very much around, you know, data, streamlining, database, technology, and yet what they were selling was actually very human, you know, something that helped people in the healthcare system, in hospitals. So we started talking about, well, look, you know, if you're doing presentations to medical staff, to technical staff, to IT people, you know, talking widgets and data streamlining and databases isn't the most powerful way of telling a story about what you do. So, you know, think about the hospital experience. Even if you go into hospital with a broken ankle, look at all the experiences you have. You know, you'll move from, you know, physio to X-ray department to surgery to the hospital ward itself. And all those are actually very human interactions that you're having while you're in hospital. So rather than talk about, you know, how technically brilliant your product is, what about it's all about weaving a story around it. Except at the end of the day, even if you are selling B2B, the person who is sitting and listening, who you're trying to influence and engage, is not a business, it's an individual. And that's where the skill of taking what could be a B2B or a B2C solution and converting it into something that an individual can engage and and understand and relate to is very, very important. So in getting this to the bottom of how to write a story, I've looked into the work of a chap called Joseph Campbell. Now, some of you may be aware of Joseph Campbell's work, but he came up with this concept of the hero's journey. And actually, once you become familiar with Joseph Campbell's work and what is called the hero's journey, no Hollywood movie will ever be the same again, because effectively, every Hollywood movie is based on the hero's journey. And what the hero's journey is about is that basically it makes up steps that the person goes through from the beginning to the very end. And the very first step, for example, is what is called the call to adventure. So we've all probably seen The Wizard of Oz or The Lion King, but for Dorothy, her call to adventure is, Toto the dog, he's about to get put down, and he's, so Dorothy decides to run away. Now, the way the hero's journey can relate to what you're doing and how you can build a story is that just as Dorothy has this call to adventure to save Toto, you are saving your customer, or you're helping your customer, and through the story you tell, you take your customer on their hero's journey. So your customer themselves is on that journey. So let's go back to the Wizard of Oz then. So the call to adventure for Dorothy is to save Toto. And on that journey, she asks for help, and she meets, I think it's Professor Marvel, who suggests that she needs to go back home. But Dorothy keeps going on, and she finds herself in a tornado. And if I relate that back to a story you're telling, this would be, for example, your customer's got a problem, and that problem is causing them chaos. And having gone into a tornado, eventually she lands in this place where it's all scary as she goes through lots of trials and tribulations where, she just wants to get back to Kansas. And in the same way, your customer, they've got a problem, they are the hero who goes through adventure, and in that adventure, they will have trials and tribulations of, coming across challenges and crisis, and eventually, she finds a solution and she gets the elixir of life, and she, comes back home, and all ends really, really well. But in that arc, from the call to adventure to getting help to the trials to crisis to result, Dorothy goes through a story. And actually, every Hollywood movie follows this formula. And this formula also works in how you can translate it across into your business storytelling. So if I go back to my healthcare software organization, who were initially talking about databases and streamlining and data and all that exciting stuff, what we did was we said, well, why don't we make your patient the hero who goes through the trials and tribulations of having a problem they're going to hospital for, then they go through all the different situations in the hospital, from X-ray to radio to surgery, and you are then helping them leave the hospital, all mended, all feeling better, but you're going through a journey with them. So it's really about and again, I say it's an art and a science because there's a degree of creativity to it, but there's also a formula behind how you do it too. So, your customer story. The story needs to be one that people want to be part of, and they need to be able to relate to what they're hearing, and they need to feel they've got to resonate with your target audience. So if I was going to put a story together for a tech company who are selling to the utilities sector, my story would be different, but I would still relate to it. I mean, other examples of stories that I've helped clients build have been, tech companies trying to sell mobile technology, and again, who uses mobile technology? It's the individual, it's the consumer. So how do we build a consumer story behind it? And I guess from my perspective, it's always about, it's who is the end user, and the end user is always a human being, it's always a person with a need. And that's where, no matter what your story is about, it's got to touch the human element. But again, there is a formula to it, and the formula I'm going to share with you is that So at the very beginning, you need to build a bond with the audience. And the bond with the audience, in the case of, I guess if you go back to The Wizard of Oz, it's very much young girl, you know, living at home, all happy, then here's the devastating news about her dog, right? And we connect with that because, you know, we can all relate to being in a home environment. But then you're introducing the tension and the conflict. And that's when you're beginning to engage with your customer, because, and story becomes alive because as a customer, right, you're feeling the tension and you're staying with it and you want to figure out how to sort the problem out. And at the very end, you solve their problem, but there is a flow as to how you do it. Now, if you're interested, I can point you to a really good website. Go and have a look at Innocent, because I think Innocent are really, really, really clever at this. If you look at the Innocent website and you look at the Innocent story, and it's a really kind of down-to-earth story, and what Innocent also do very well is their brand, Innocent, you know, their brand archetype is very much about innocence anyway. And the whole story starts off in 1999 when Rich, Adam and John are at a music festival and decide that they want to try selling their innocent smoothies, and they have 2 bins and they're giving away these smoothies, and they're saying, would you buy it? If it's yes, drop the empty bottle in the yes bin, and if it's a no, drop it in the no bin. And at the end of the day, the yes bin is full, right? And hence a business is born. But if you look at their website, I mean, that's a well-known story. We all know about how Innocent started. But if you look at their website, you look at the whole Innocent story, it's got trials and tribulations. Having had some amazing yes from all these people who attended the music festival, what happened next was they got a no, because nobody would touch them. You know, whether it was, you know, they went to every venture capitalist, they went everywhere, tried to get some money to get funding, and absolutely, you know, nobody was saying yes. And then one day, Hero came along and he gave them some money, and the Innocent brand kicked off. Okay, so now we have, you know, nice at the festival. We can all connect with that nice festival feeling. People all together have a little idea. They test their idea out. It's a wow. It's a yes, but then it's a no. Right? They can't get money. Then they get funding. And then if you look at their storyline, you see more no's. They tried a product called New Dawn Juices, and it was a failure. And then they launched their big smoothies, and it was a success. So all the time as you are looking at the smoothie story, it's not, you know, it's not a happy ending. It's got ups and downs, and that tension with the ups and downs is what will engage your customers. It's what will keep your customers interested. And it's very much, you know, the Joseph Campbell arc of, you know, and if you think about Dorothy as she's in The Wizard of Oz, you know, she has good bits when she meets her friends, and she has bad bits when the witch turns up. And that tension remains all the way through the whole film until at the end, wow, it's all sorted. So weaving your story together, it's about, you know, starting with the connection at the beginning, making them feel they're on your side, and then introducing tension around that, where things can go up and down until you finally resolve it and sort it out. So it's a bit like this, quite straightforward actually. So the beginning, you know, is very neutral, then you have a high, and then you kind of float around the top, then you hit rock bottom, and you keep bringing them up and down until the very end. You finish on a high, and you say, okay, now that it's solved, what should you be doing next? What's your next call to action? So it's very much what it is and what it could be, and you're juxtaposing the tension between those two. So the key formula here is that your story has absolutely it's got to resolve an imbalance or conflict, and that's what it will keep. That is what will keep your audience interested. You know, it's like just when they think they've figured it out, you know, something goes wrong, and that tension, you know, is what throws them off balance as well. You know, it's that bridge between what it is and what it could be, but that tension should feel natural. It should not feel awkward. So in deciding the journey you're going to take your customer on, the ebbs and flows should be totally relatable to the way they, to the problems they are having, so it doesn't feel it's too manufactured. A bit like a, those of you who like metaphors, a bit like you're sailing ship in a storm. And to make it really powerful, you do want to throw them off balance, and the more you can set the tension up, I'll go back to the innocent one. I think at one point they were nearly bankrupt because they gave too much money to charity. Again, that's very clever because, innocent brand, fresh. The word innocent means it's, there's a social enterprise element to that word in itself. So, and then, guess what? We were nearly bankrupt. Wow, what happened next? You want to know what happened next? Oh my goodness! And then you got sold to Coca-Cola. Well, that's another story. But again, it's that ebb and flow of potential that you want to create with them. So I guess the starting point is, what is the story I'm trying to sell? What is it? Where do you want to take them to? And if anything, the story itself is more important than the word. And the key is to really, usually making one point can be more powerful than making lots and lots of points. But what will really make your story hold together if there's empathy. And people, use facts and numbers and logic to match together what they're feeling in empathy. So empathy is far more powerful. And, the facts and the anecdotes and logic is what cement the story together. But the key is, we can all relate to, we can all kind of feel something for someone who's about to have their dog put down, or someone who's having a very nice, casual, fun day at a music festival and this wonderful, exercise or experiment works. And that's not really is what will create that connection with your audience. Okay, this is going to be a video, which I don't think is going to play. So I'm just taking a sip of water. So if those of you connect with me afterwards, I can send you a link to this. This is a really great example. I didn't realize videos don't play on WebEx, but I can send them to you. But basically, there are many, many, many fantastic examples of storytelling that can prompt in your direction. So, what's your role in this, right? So, you are the storyteller. So, your role is very much, you're the guide, right? You're in crafting your story together. You're on their side. You're taking them through it. And what they've got to feel is that they can have confidence in what you're saying, and you're using all the right tools. Now, the people's attention spans getting shorter and shorter. To have visual representations to tell a story, creating common ground are all absolutely key to, keeping that connection going with your audience. Okay. So, I don't know if any of you have read a really good book I would recommend called The Chimp Paradox by John Peters, where he talks about how our chimp brain is more powerful than our logical brain. So your chimp brain is it's a brain which is your emotional brain, and actually it's the first brain that you have before the logical brain comes into action. And anyone with small kids under the age of 2 or 3 probably recognise that's all they have is that chimp brain, but we all have it. We all have emotional drivers, and the ones that John Peters talks about in his chimp book are, the desire for food, the desire to feel secure, the desire for sex, the desire to be a parent, the desire to have shelter, territory, power, the desire for ego, the desire to belong to a group. Now, we don't have every one of those desires all the time at the same time. For some people, and I've met quite a lot of these in my career, the desire for ego and power is really dialed up high. So basically, you know, if the story can feed into their ego and power, guess what? They are engaged, right? For other people, the desire for security, you know, is this thing going to keep me secure? If you're selling a product like insurance, you know, or IT security, you know, that desire is going to be really dialed up high. So your story needs to have that weaved in. Yeah. So a story has got to connect with what could be their, you know, what is their big emotional driver. And what will happen is that they will be getting impacted emotionally, but then using logic to explain away that emotional drive and say, okay, that's fine, yes. It is very important that we do buy this product, but in reality, the real reason they want to buy it is because it makes them feel powerful or it makes them feel safe. So in any story you tell, the minute you start creating tension, you're beginning to, you know, you're beginning to push triggers, emotional triggers, and it's those emotional triggers that get them to buy into what you're trying to say. Okay, so the other, actually, before I go into this slide, the other book I would sort of recommend you looking into is a book by Daniel Kahneman, who is a Nobel Prize winning economist who's written something called Think Fast and Slow. And Daniel Kahneman's book really complements the Chimp book, because what he talks about is how illogical people are, right? And he talks about how we have two systems, and he calls system one fast and emotional. So if I say to you, what's 2 plus 2? I'm assuming you're all going, yeah, 4, right? It's an automatic emotional response. But if I said to you, you know, can you count all the lowercase e's in my slide that you can see in front of you? That will take you a lot longer, okay? But guess what? As human beings, we prefer system one, right? Say, what's 2 plus 2? So we are more likely to make decisions very quickly and emotionally, and we prefer not to make decisions slowly and deliberately. So let's say, how does that translate to storytelling? Well, what happens is that what he also came up with is that we are more driven and to fight away loss. So we prefer not to lose than go towards winning, right? So we are more programmed towards loss aversion. And if I had to be crude, I'd say that's why fear-based selling works, because if your story creates fear and hits an emotional driver, that's going to get you a better result than a story which, you know, takes them towards a beautiful, glamorous future and doesn't hit any emotional nerves. So the whole skill here is understanding in that tension, you are taking people, you're making them aware of something they could lose, right? Something they yearn not to lose, and then you're resolving it for them. If you look at the, you know, the various stories I've talked about today, that's what all Hollywood movies do actually. It's always a fear of loss that the hero goes out to resolve. And so, you know, there's a lot of science and economics behind, you know, how you can weave a story together. But in terms of when you start building a story, the first thing to do is, you know, you are the guide on the side, you know, so you need to be, you need to position yourself to be in agreement with the audience. They've got to feel that, you know, you're with them. You're not against them. You're not talking down on them. You're not talking up to them. You're talking, you're with them, right? And you want to really capture their reality, understand their perspective, their context and their values. And if I go back to, again, I'll talk about Innocent for a second. Innocent as a brand is so successful because they've totally tapped into their market. You know, the Innocent they're very much tapped into the brand archetype of the, you know, the innocent, you know, it's all fresh food, 100%, so they say. you know, the explorer, there's adventure behind them. So they're really relating to their audience's values and then take them on a journey with that. So connecting with your audience is absolutely key. And that connection has got to happen at the very, very start. And then, having made that connection, and you start building your story up, that's when you start building that contrast in, right? Well, you know, right now you've got so many people who come in for X-ray at your hospital, but, you know, do you realize that what it's taking you 4 hours could take you 1 hour, you know? And that's when you start building in the, the contrast and, you know, are you moving back and forth all the time so that they are getting hooked and staying hooked? And in building that contrast, you know, you're using a combination of emotions, delivery, and content. And by that, what I mean is, this is where you can put in some interesting facts. You know, this is where you can say, you know, give them some, you know, numbers and you know, facts which could really get an emotional response. One of my favourite ones of all time is this one, actually. This is Bill Gates. Bill Gates was, this is TEDx in 2009, the tech conference, and Bill walked onto the stage. And in this jar, he had a jar full of mosquitoes. And he opened up the mosquito jar and let the mosquitoes flow around the auditorium. And the whole audience just gasped with fear. Okay? And Bill said, you know, I don't see why malaria should just be a third world problem. I don't see why we can't share the whole experience of it. And obviously, you know, people in the audience are terrified. So in terms of getting a message across, and I don't suggest, by the way, we go into our customers and release mosquitoes at them, but in terms of what he did was very, very powerful, right? Because emotion, wow, fear, right? You know, this is about survival, forget about the rest of it. Content, yeah, his content was interesting, not your normal slideshow. He had mosquitoes. Delivery, well, he delivered them by opening up the stage. Now, the reality was actually that those mosquitoes didn't carry malaria, but he got, you know, he got an impact, and he got the audience to, you know, to react, and it was very, very successful. Again, it's about the creativity, you know. So here's Bill Gates, you know, you all know who he is. He creates conflict by releasing them. And at the end of it, he goes, fine, these mosquitoes are safe, but what are you going to do about it? Call to action. And another one of my really favorite ones is, this is the late Steve Jobs, actually. And again, this is a 1-minute presentation. I'd go and watch it on YouTube if you've got a moment at some point, not now, obviously. But so Steve Jobs has, you know, he walks onto the stage and he's talking about his MacBook Air, and he goes, well, guys, you know, he actually shows a big slide of the MacBook Air, and he said, you know, this is the world's thinnest notebook, okay? And then he casually walks across to a table and pulls out the notebook from a brown, you know, one of those kind of office envelopes. And yes, it is, you know, and all, the audience just gasped because, you know, the table was casually at the end of the stage, and when he pulled it out, it was like, wow, right? He got his wow at the end. And again, you know, in terms of content, emotion, delivery, he hit everyone. And actually, he also got a very strong message across in the most effective way. Okay, so again, this is another way of getting a message across, right? I mean, do feel free to say, what would you rather eat, the biscuits or the broccoli? I'm not sure, but, you know, again, it's a complicated message, but it's coming across, you know, really, really, really powerfully. So, you know, it's about what do you want to say, what's the most powerful way to say it, and there is a degree of creativity here. It's also a degree of, you know, what will resonate with my client. Okay, so we've looked at storytelling, right? The arc, of the hero's journey. We talked about having emotions in there, the emotional brain. We looked at the fact that human beings are illogical. They would rather, they focus on loss aversion rather than what they could have. So what stories do is, you know, when you're telling a story, it's about adding emotional texture, right? And it's using stories intentionally. You know, there are lots of, again, there's some fantastic TED Talks out there which give you really, really good ideas about, and what these people do really well is actually, they often talk about their own personal stories, but only the ones that totally relate to what they are talking about. You know, transforming facts into anecdotes. You know, so Steve Jobs could have sat there or stood there and talked for an hour about, you know, the widgets and the so forth that have gone into the MacBook Air, but actually to move across the audience and across the stage and pull this MacBook out of an envelope is far more powerful, right? You know, and the same with Bill Gates. You know, to pull that jar off the mosquito is far more powerful, right? It's going to get a reaction, and good stories get a reaction. But it's all about how you pull that story together. Okay. So where do your stories come from? Well, this is where I'm going to pass it over to you actually, because they are your personal stories. And I know that when I'm doing my presentations, I have a whole lot of stories, different ones for every scenario I'm in. So when I was talking about my, you know, my working with my healthcare client who were selling databases and streamlining data, and we have to change that around to actually how about patient care and the patient experience of a hospital experience. I was actually talking about my own ankle experience, right? Because I broke my ankle and I went through all those different departments and it was chaotic. But actually, when you pull your own stories in, it's a lot more powerful, right? So this is where I think it's almost like brain mapping and, you know, just thinking through what's happened to you. And it could be, you know, a story from your childhood, an authority figure, a job that you had, a friend that you've got, or an experience that you have. So, you know, become observant about everyday life. And you know, and I'm always looking for interesting things that are happening. And actually, for me, the most interesting things are often the minutiae of daily life. And it's about how do I take that and build it in to a story I can tell. You know, how can I build that anecdotal story, add facts to it, add some numbers, because that logical brain will be saying, yeah, you're saying that, but can you prove it, right? So you've got your emotional bit. You're adding a fact to it, and that's when it becomes really powerful. So, you know, again, go back to your personal database and just start thinking through of stories that you have, or clients that you worked with. I think somebody asked, you know, what if my client won't let me use their name? Well, if they won't, you don't have to use their name, but you can, you know, you can be a storyteller. You can edit bits and not use their name, but you can fabricate and maybe pull two client stories together to make into one story. You know, it's a creative process. And this is what I don't want you to do. Please, no more racing cars and no more climbing on top of mountains. Because we've seen a lot of those, and frankly, they're getting a bit dry. If I see one more presentation where somebody climbed on top of a mountain, or a racing car that made them win the race. So, you know, when it comes to metaphors, you know, again, it's about being more creative, you know, and so again, these great ones come from everyday life, so become observant of what's happening. And if you need some ideas, go and listen to some TED Talks. So, part of great storytelling is, it's about giving them something they always remember, right? You know, shocking stats. So if I said to you, 95% of 18 to 34-year-olds are likely to follow a brand via social networking or social media. Wow, okay. Therefore, storytelling is really, really important, that your business, if it's selling to that audience, needs to engage that audience by using all the things we've talked about today. Otherwise, you are not engaging with the right audience at the right time. Or if you're selling to a customer, a B2B customer, whose audience is this audience, then are you relating to them in the way that they're going to buy from you? So stats are always good. Evocative visuals, so we just saw that both with Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. Personal stories, absolutely. Some of the greatest presenters, they know exactly which personal stories to use. Again, memorable dramatization, the two examples I've talked about today, and coming up with a repeatable soundbite. Come up with a way that summarizes what you do. People remember those. So, in conclusion then, principles of storytelling, apply the principles. We've all heard about beginning, middle, end, but I wanted to give you more than that and talk about Joseph Campbell's arc, which is all about the hero's journey, right? You connect with the hero, the hero's life is okay, and then things start to go wrong, and there's a tension where you solve the problem, then there's another problem, you solve that problem, then something else happens, and at the end of the hero's journey, they have relief and they have a solution, and all the way through you are with them. And it's about crafting the beginning. At the beginning, you are, everything's okay, and at the beginning is when they start trusting you. You go into the middle. The ending's got to be powerful. Then think about creative ways of having and adding emotional texture, or using really powerful metaphors that become the glue, and have created something they always remember. And always remember that the emotional brain is far more powerful than the logical brain. So that brings me to a nice 40-minute Q&A session. Right, well done, guys. So, yes, do start putting some questions into the chat box, and we'll see what we can do. Okay, I've just seen all your questions. Right, so
Salma, thank you so much for that. You've covered a lot of ground in just a short amount of time. So thank you for that. I don't know if people are sending some questions to you directly, but you can use the chat function. And I know that you covered one of them that was submitted in advance earlier, which was how do you approach clients who are reluctant to let you use their name logo in your story, and you touched on that. But somebody had asked in advance, can you share some examples of brands which have quantifiably strengthened as a result of their storytelling impact? So I don't know if there's other. I know that you spoke about Innocent. I don't know if there's any others that you.
Well, there's another one. Okay, I'm going to go back into my personal memory bank here. I think there's a really, has anyone online heard of a business called Made.com?
Yeah.
Right, okay. If you've got Made.com, has got a very powerful story behind how they sell their furniture compared to buying it from John Lewis or one of those big department stores. Because if you go into Made.com, you actually see their story on the wall of how, the idea for a piece of furniture begins in somebody's head, then this person travels to some country and sources products and creates the whole thing. So when you are shopping in Made.com, you're not buying a sofa, you're buying an experience. And Made.com and a couple of these other furniture businesses that have really been to, do very well, have really shaken that sector by storm, because they've moved away from this whole way you have to, they've moved it onto an online platform as well. So I think Made.com is another very interesting one to watch. Starbucks was another one. Why would you pay, well, I don't know, £4 to £5 for a Starbucks coffee when you can walk past somewhere where it sells it for £1.20, and Starbucks is the cost. There's a big story behind that too. Also, people that run. If you're a small business and it's just 1 or 2 people or 2 or 3 people, it's about you. It's your story that your clients are going to buy before they buy your services.
Thanks, Salma. I've got another question here that's coming from Hannah, and
Right.
she says, outside of the story of how your business came to be or customer case studies, are there other kinds of stories you can tell? And and then a kind of subsequent question, in what instances and in what format could you share a story? And interesting, I kind of had a question about the kind of format and how long a story would be if, you know, if you're in a client meeting and, you know, different doing a TED talk and telling a story, you know, in 10 minutes or something. But so outside, so what other kind of stories can you tell, and in what kind of format would they be, do you think?
I think we all need to have lots of stories up our sleeve that we whiz out as if it's anecdotal and it just popped into my head right now. And they need to be appropriate to the situation. So you know, anything from a few minutes, right, to a 4 or 5 minute story to a half-an-hour presentation. You know, it's recognizing that people will engage with what you have to say if there's a story built around it. And you know, if you're trying to sell something and you haven't got a case study and you haven't got a, you know, it's not a presentation, you still need to have a way of marketing what you're doing to your client. So I would, in that case, create a customer avatar. And by that I mean, you know, create somebody that you will be speaking to and weave a story around that. So it could be a made-up story, but in that, I think if you're making up a story, if you can weave current news, topics, facts, figures, day-to-day stuff into it, it becomes powerful. You know, something that people can.
And how often do you update the stories?
For me, it's an ongoing process, to be fair, because you know, of course, I have to pull a story together for a particular presentation, but otherwise, I am constantly on the lookout for things that I can pull together. But that's possibly because my brain works in that way. You know, it's quite a brain that's always looking for. I'm very nosy, in other words. But I think it should be a continuous process. But often marketing will have a set number of stories that then get rolled out into the business.
Mm-hmm.
So you know, it could be a story a marketing story per product line that you're selling. So you could be a business where you want to make sure that everyone sells your product in the same way. It's B2B, and then that could be a marketing story owned by marketing, rolled out to sales and to customer-facing employees.
Okay, great. And I've got another question come in from Fee, who's saying, how do you recommend handling an analytical client? So one who is very facts and data driven, and what's the best way to convince them of the, her question is, what's the best way to convince them of the positive impact of, because you talked about empathy, I'm just wondering how that fits against the facts and figures.
Hello. Back to my story, and to the point they don't even realise that I'm telling a story. So I'd have lots of strong facts up front, like 85% of this and 45% of this, and this is a, you know, I'll give an example. Actually, I was doing some work with a security software company, the driest product in the world, right? But they were selling security software, and they needed to sell that to their customers, and yet what they were selling was highly technical. So we weaved a story around, you know, 95% of security threats coming via Word, via PowerPoint, whatever, I'm making it up now, right? But what we did was we weaved facts around the story, and the facts were very emotive facts. So they were true, of course. Yeah. So I'd use more logic and more facts, but I'd put them into a story context that they can relate to in their world. Does that answer your question?
Well, I hope so for Fee. She said thank you to me on the chat function, so that's great. If there are any more questions for Salma, please do use the chat function and send them through so that we can have a look at them. Salma, a couple of people have asked for the different resources that you mentioned, the different books, so I'll follow up with you afterwards and make sure that we've got those links. And you also mentioned, and again, you can follow up with me afterwards, about, you said there's some fantastic TED Talks that you think maybe are worth people are worth people watching, and I guess at the core of it is that the clients that you're selling to, they are still all individuals. Jack, I can see that you've got a question. Just want to type the question into the chat function, and I can ask it for Salma. So please just type the question for me, and I can ask on your behalf. You know, at the end of the day, you know, clients are individuals.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely. I mean, whether you're selling security or software, even if you are selling to a business, the people in that business are human. Therefore, it has to have a human element to it.
Yeah.
And as humans, we have emotional drivers. So the level of sophistication you can use in your story is obviously relatable to the industry you're selling in.
Yeah. So I'm just watching the chat function. Yes, absolutely, and I guess that's why I was asking, how often as well do you update your stories, and do you have a bank of stories that people can then can call upon, and how? Yeah, I guess that's why I was wondering how long they might be as well.
I think it depends. I mean, I think you should have lots of stories for different situations, and you know, anything from a formal presentation, no more than 18 minutes, if that's too long as well, to a 5-minute story.
Yeah.
You know, and pull them in as much appropriate.
Absolutely. Okay. I don't. There was a miscommunication with Jack, and there's no question. Does anybody have? We'll close in a few minutes, but does anybody have any more questions for Salma? Salma, just now. Salma, I don't know if you want to go onto your final slide with your contact details.
Okay. So here you go. So that's my email address. If you drop me an email, I will get back to you with all those things I talked about. We'll share them anyway. On my website, I've got a free archetype quiz. So I think during the presentation, I talked a lot about, you know, the innocent bounds archetype. This is really for individuals, but actually because you're selling to individuals, it's recognizing how to weave a story around your personal brand, the brand archetype. It's free. So those are the free things on my website as well. So, and to follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook.
Great. And so what I'll do afterwards, I will collate the different books that you mentioned and some of the TED Talks that you like, and also share the link to the video that we weren't able to play on WebEx. So I've got a question from Marianne, who's just saying, what led to the trend for storytelling to become more popular in business compared to, say, maybe 10 years ago? And are you kind of perceiving that there's going to be an ongoing or a future trend, and what that might look like going forward around storytelling?
I mean, that's interesting, because I've been working in tech. Well, I've worked in tech for 17 years, and I've been working for myself for 10 years. We've always told stories. I just think the trend's always been there. I think some people are doing it naturally, and I think social media's probably got a big part to play as well, because we've realised we need to have different ways of engaging our customers. Mm-hmm. I think absolutely this is not going to go away. I think it's going to become more complicated, more sophisticated, if anything.
More sophisticated, yeah.
I think so. You know, I think the way the market's going, customers have very much made up their mind about you before they engage with you. So they decide to work with you. You know, the 80% in their decision-making process before they engage with you. This is B2B, so it's B2C. So if your story isn't quite tying together, you know, they may not even engage with you.
Great.
Yeah.
So hopefully maybe some of the TED Talks might give people ideas about stories that they can build. Are there any other, just as a final question, are there any other resources that maybe people could look to for inspiration for how they could build some stories around their offering. I know so many of the businesses in our network are professional services, so they've not necessarily got a product as such, a physical product. It's much more likely to be something around consulting or intellectual property or an idea or a service. I don't know if you've got anywhere that you might recommend that they have a look at to inspire them.
Yeah, I think the TED Talks are really, really good, and I think my business is a services business rather than product business, and I think storytelling really translates really, really well because we tell stories about people. So again, I think the TED Talk really, really help.
Great. Okay. Well, I don't think there's any more questions. There's nothing else come through on the chat function. I've had a number of people saying thank you very much, which is great, and we'll share the slides and the recording so you can listen back if you'd like, and also for those people who weren't able to join live, they'll be able to listen to the presentation again. So Salma, thank you so much for presenting for us today. This has been super interesting, and I've got lots of notes myself next to me. And having a think about how maybe WeConnect can tell its story in a different way as well.
How interesting. Okay, great. No, thank you very much.
Brilliant. No, and thank you to all of you for dialing in and for participating today. And we'll look forward to being in touch again in the not too distant future. But Salma, thank you so much for your time, and I will look forward to sharing the recording with everybody.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers.
Bye. Bye.